In this video, I'm going to tell you what to do when you actually just want to get some games played on the tabletop. Generally, I paint things to go onto the tabletop. I paint things to play. I paint in a style and a visual look that is not necessarily for display paint. It is for, this is good enough for desktop, tabletop paint. And I'm not trying to spend tons and tons of time to make a specifically perfect looking model that I'm going to sit on a shelf or maybe enter in a competition. There's nothing wrong with that, but I like to play, so I like to paint to play. Now, I still paint far more than I play, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the future here, but in general, I'm trying to get things done so that I can get them onto the tabletop and play. Warcry. I've been building a lot of war bands lately because I've been playing a lot of Warcry. I've been enjoying that, and that's a lot of fun. But there's also all kinds of other games out there. And for me, a big thing is taking the time to figure out, okay, well, so like with Warcry, what are the models that I want to build to put into my next war band? I'm working on some Slaves to Darkness, and I want to put some cool stuff in there. How am I doing that? I've been painting Slaves to Darkness on Twitch, and I'm nearly done with my first roster. But I'll probably add stuff to it down the road, and that's part of the fun for me too. Not just the actual painting and the actual playing, but the thinking about well, what am I going to do next? What am I going to build next to go and then paint and then play? Same with games that don't have models affiliated with them, like say something like Warcry. Games like Zona Alpha, let's say. I like to do all kinds of different things and figure out where can I find cool models that'll fit this theme? Where can I find cool terrain that'll fit this theme? And I go through all of that, and I spend a ton of time on it. But the idea is that eventually I'm going to sit down and actually play. And like I said, I spend a good deal more time painting and building and whatnot than playing. And I think for the most part, most people do. Unless you are a tournament player who plays just one game and plays just one army in that game, then once you've got that set, you're ready to just play and play and play and play and play until you either decide to switch armies or maybe add some stuff to it or whatever the deal is. But it's at that point, you are now just in play mode because maybe you are practicing to go to a big tournament or go to a small tournament, which will then hopefully get you to a big tournament or whatever. There's all kinds of different things. But the problem that I hear about, and this is actually a comment from a recent video, I do all this painting and playing, this person says, but I don't seem to get stuff onto the actual tabletop to play, and why is that? In this day and age, it would be obviously very easy for us to say, oh, well, because COVID, which we can blame just about anything on these days, it seems. But for it's not necessarily the case all the time. Certainly, there are fewer games being played these days, although things are starting to get better. But yeah, it's been hard to get games with people, obviously, when we're in lockdown or when we're concerned about our health and that kind of stuff. But it's also been difficult before COVID, honestly, sometimes to figure out, once you've got this stuff ready to go, well, cool. Now I need to get something done with it. I need to actually get some games in, and how am I going to do that? And I'm going to try to help, I guess. We'll see how it works. So time is, of course, an issue because we all have the same amount of time, 24 hours and all, but in that we only have a certain amount of free time. Maybe you've got multiple jobs, maybe you've got a family that you have to take care of and things like that. So you've only got so much time to spend on your hobby. And so you're painting because you want to get things done. And you eventually do get to a jumping off point, and now you want to get out there and play. And I'm going to be telling you right now, and if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know what I'm going to say. I think skirmish games are a better bet, especially when you have limited amounts of time. If you want to get things actually done and on the table and start playing, it's way easier when you have 8 models to paint and just a little bit of terrain to go on that table versus a 4x6 table full of terrain and a couple hundred models that you have to paint. It's just, I talk to people all the time who started working on a big army and then painted and painted and painted and painted, and then just before they finished, either a new codex or army book or even new rule system for that game popped up, and now they kind of have to reevaluate, not usually start over, but at least there's definitely some changes and things like that, because it can take a long time for obviously a lot of models, especially if you are trying to paint to a real high quality. So if you're looking to try to get things on the table, definitely focus, in my opinion, on small games. Many times the ability to get games together is because it is difficult to coordinate with somebody else. There's one person you can always coordinate with, probably, and that's yourself. So think about solo gaming. Now, I'm not necessarily even saying the game has to be designed for solo. I mean, a lot of what I did when I first started getting into Warcry, as I've mentioned, is that I was playing it by myself. I wasn't playing any specific solo rules because I don't think there were any. I'm not even still sure if there are any solo rules that have been released for Warcry, but nonetheless, you can still play with two forces and then just play both forces. The benefit to doing that, it may not, especially if it doesn't actually have rules designed for solo play, it might seem a little weird. It might not necessarily seem fun, but it does teach you more about the game. One of the easiest ways to learn a game is to read through the instructions, then sit down and stumble through a game. And if you're stumbling through it by yourself, that you don't feel like you're putting this person out and wasting their time who's you're trying to teach this game to. And then when you go back and read the instructions again, things will make a lot more sense almost instantly. So definitely think about trying to play either a game that's not designed to be solo and doing that just to help learn so that when you do actually get somebody on the other side of the table from you, you'll not be stumbling through the rules, you'll understand them a bit better. But also take a look at a lot of games out there, especially since the beginning of the pandemic, that have been releasing solo play rules for their games, or they are games that have solo play and sometimes usually co-op play baked right in. That can help you actually get more games on the table if that's what you're looking to do with all these models you keep painting. Another way to help get actual games played is to get some family involved. If you've got a significant other who is even vaguely interested, it's something that you can do together. It's quality time. They may be absolutely uninterested and not looking to do it at all, and that's fine. Then this is skip on to the next bit. But if you've got a spouse or like a significant other or some other family member who would be interested in giving it a try, generally there's more of that kind of relationship thing going on. You're maybe not necessarily as nervous around a person who is, who's part of your family, hopefully, and then you can try some games there, and maybe. Just maybe, you'll get a convert. You'll get somebody who's now a little bit more interested in doing this. Again, if you're going to be doing that, you're going to have to bring in, both forces to play and all the terrain and all that kind of stuff. But if you've been spending a lot of time painting and building, you probably have that stuff ready to go. And again, if it's a skirmish game, it's a lower bar. You don't have to paint two huge armies. You paint two small crews. You have a smaller table. And then you get, your uncle involved or, your sister or, whatever. I hear from viewers quite frequently, they say, well, all the other tabletop gamers in my area, they only play 40K, or they only play Age of Sigmar, or they only play whatever the game is, and they don't want to play the game that I'm interested in. And so even though I have built two forces of this skirmish game that I found online or whatever it is, they're just like, nah, man, I just play, whatever. I like to play this game that's real popular and stuff like that. And that's a tough sell, absolutely. But that doesn't mean you can't get folks who are also interested in tabletop games of other genres and maybe get them a little convinced. It is difficult to get someone who does not play tabletop games at all to understand the concepts behind tabletop games. But if you've got a friend who's a big board gamer or a role-playing player, or even like Magic the Gathering, those types of collectible cards, those other genres, they understand the concepts behind tabletop gaming. So when you say, look, this is kind of like a board game, except the board's big and there's no squares on it, and you use a tape measure, but there's still dice and all, that kind of stuff. It's a little bit easier to get those folks to play along. And again, if they don't have to supply anything, you can usually kind of help to get those folks a little bit more interested in it. They may try it, they may not find it's for them, or they may decide, hey, this is cool as long as I'm using your stuff, so I don't have to learn how to, build or paint or buy any of these extra things, and that's fine too. You're still getting games in. Even if you have to supply everything, you're still getting games in. When I want to play Warcry, I have everything I need, including multiple teams, all in a big plastic tub, and I can just take it out and set everything up, and then we could start playing. So it's a good idea, again, to have something like that and to focus on people who are already playing tabletop games. Generally, if you can find somebody who's into wargaming, that's cool because they're going to understand even more of it. But if they're into, board games or RPGs or whatever, they're going to figure it out pretty quick. For many people, the building and the painting with the idea that eventually someday they will actually play this game, for a lot of people, that's okay. That's fine. But if you're interested in saying, I've gone through all of this work, I've bought these things, I've sanded all the little lines off, and I painted them and primed them and all that jazz, generally you prime first and then paint. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. But you've gone through all of that and you have this stuff, and now you're just like, well, but where are all the people who want to play it? And I'll be perfectly honest, in many situations, and I've talked about this on the channel a bunch of times before, talking about being a gaming advocate. But Chow, sometimes you have to become a gaming advocate, which is to say you have to take the reins. You have to say, look, I've got everything you need here. Just you come over, I'll teach you this game. It's fun. Have them over to your house. If you don't know them very well, have them to the game shop. It's a public place, and it's fine. If it's family, you know them relatively well, and so it's not a problem. And again, there's always solo gaming. And I suggest you do some solo gaming at least just to figure out the rules before you start trying to teach your family and your friends who play role-playing games and all that kind of stuff. But if push comes to shove, there's plenty of games out there these days that are designed with solo play in mind, and that'll hopefully get you through until you eventually find somebody to play these games with.